Hey NBL, welcome to another episode of TFA's 2-Point Conversion. I'm your host, TFA. This week on the 2-Point Conversion, I'm going to be unveiling 3 new segments. First segment's going to be the good, the bad, and the ugly. The second segment is going to be TFA's Cold Hard Facts. And the third segment is going to be a new segment I like to call the X Factor. Each segment will be made a little bit clearer as the podcast continues. I'm going to skip over the weekly review, as this is going to be one of the main focuses of the Forverts podcast. So instead of having the same type of segment on each show, we're going to let Sonny go ahead and handle all of those weekly reviews. Let's jump right in this week with our first new segment, the good, the bad, and the ugly. For this segment, I'm going to give 2 picks for each, and these teams or owners have exemplified the qualities, the good, the bad, and the ugly qualities this season. First, I'm going to start off with the good. The Oakland Raiders and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals are currently on pace to not only win the AFC North, but grab a first-round bye in the process. They've taken control of the entire division that had previously been controlled by Lip and the Steelers. At the halfway point on the season, the Bengals are currently 2.5 games up on the Steelers for first in the division, and they also hold the best record in the AFC. We'll see how this team fares in the second half of the season. The Oakland Raiders are currently sitting at 6-2 and are 1 game back of the division lead in the AFC West. I think the Oakland Raiders are kind of one of the bigger surprise stories this year. They're one of the more feel-good stories. Project Fat is doing a great job with that team. Everybody kind of predicts him to be at the bottom of that division every single year, and this is one of the toughest divisions in NBL history. So to see Fat 1 game back of the division lead is really a truly impressive feat. He's competing for his first playoff berth in Madden 16, and we're going to see if he can continue his winning ways or if he'll have a late season collapse and miss out again. Honorable mention for the good. The Arizona Cardinals, they're sitting at 5-3. Play has got that team in the hunt for a playoff spot in the NFC. He's assembled a really good roster and is doing a great job on the season, so congrats, Playa, on your honorable mention. The bad. We're going to go with the San Francisco 49ers and the New Orleans Saints. The 49ers are currently the last winless team as we enter the second half of the season, and only time's going to tell if this team will get a win or not. We could see our first winless team since Fry went winless in back-to-back years to start off Madden 16. The other bad is the team that went back-to-back, Fry and his New Orleans Saints. This was a team that I picked in the preseason to make a lot of noise. I thought they had a really good offseason. They improved season after season the last few years. And this team was definitely on the up and up. And I don't see them doing anything this year. They've done the exact opposite of what a lot of people had predicted them to do. I thought they'd keep improving, and instead they've kind of taken a step back. They haven't been able to cash in on all these early draft picks that they get year after year. They had their best season last year, and now they're down to only 1 win on the season. This team really needs to pick up their play if they want to continue improving. The ugly. We're going to go with only the San Diego Chargers. If I could have put the Chargers here, I would have listed them twice. This team went from Super Bowl runner-ups, and now they're at the bottom of the AFC at 2-6. They're struggling in every aspect of the game this season. It could be one of the biggest turnarounds from good to bad in NBL history. Quarterback play has just been atrocious. The overall team morale is just being depleted week by week. This team has the potential to go on a run, and they're going to need to win every game from here on out if they want any hope of making it back to the playoffs. Next up this week, we have TFA's Cold Hard Facts. This segment, I'm going to give my takes on 3 issues and bring the facts to back them up. The Tennessee Titans have fallen to 3-4 on the season after having their best season in Madden 16. This team has never had good quarterback play, and the trend continues this season. Marcus Mariota is nothing to write home about. The main difference between this season and last season has been the play of halfback Dontre Sanford. This guy was at the top of the league in rushing last season. So far, he hasn't even eclipsed the 300-yard mark. He's averaging over 2 yards less per carry this season. And if he doesn't come around, the bottom feeders of this division are going to make the Titans sing the Nashville Blues. They're going to have a tough road from here on out. I think the Colts and the Texans can definitely compete for the division. And being only 3-4, I think the Texans are going to win this division, and that's a cold hard fact. The Minnesota Vikings made the playoffs last year and currently sit 3rd in the division at 3-5. A lot of talk was made in the offseason about how APV could compete with Bomber in this division. However, in a year where the Lions started off really, really slow, this team wasn't able to capitalize and take control. Instead, they've been cursed with terrible quarterback play, much like the Titans have been. Mason Marks, fourth-year quarterback, has a QB rating of 57.3, which is by far the worst of his young career. He's almost 20 points lower than he was the past 2 seasons. He's already thrown 19 interceptions on the season. If the Vikings quarterback play can improve, I think they're going to make a push for the wild card, and if it continues to be piss poor, they're going to find themselves with a top 10 draft pick. And that's a cold hard fact. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are currently sitting at 4-4, just a year removed from finishing 2-14. They've already made a 2-game improvement, and they're sitting at 500 on the season, which is a huge jump. They had one of the best off seasons in the entire league, and it's definitely paying off for this team. They're in the hunt for a wild card right now. I have them favored right now in 5 games down the stretch. I think they can definitely compete in every single one of those games. Weeks 13 through 16, they're going to have a real tough stretch. They have to face the Falcons twice, the Seahawks, and the Titans. I believe that if the Bucs can continue their winning ways and squeeze out a 2-2 record through these 4 weeks, they'll grab the last playoff spot in the NFC while completing a storybook season. And that's a cold hard fact. Finally, we're going to end this week with my final news segment called The X Factor. The X in this case stands for a strike. No, not the strike that you want to get, but the strike you don't. We're not talking, a strike in bowling where you get a strike and you're all excited. This is strike 3 in baseball, and you just cost your team, an out and possibly a win. This week we're going to look into the suspensions of 2 powerhouse NFC members, the Falcons and the Panthers, and see how these suspensions could possibly affect the playoff race as the season progresses. The Falcons suspension allowed for the Cardinals and the Saints and the Texans to all pick up wins that they otherwise may not have gotten. These are definitely games that these teams probably wouldn't have won otherwise, if they hadn't gotten the suspension for the Falcons. The Texans are currently 1 game back of the division lead in the AFC South, so they're only 1 game out of a division lead. They could be 2 games out if the Falcons actually had to play in this game. So instead of having 2 wins, they've got 3 on the season. And in a down year for the Titans, who lost to the Falcons, this is a big win for the Texans to get. We have the Cardinals, who are currently sitting at 5-3. They're currently holding the last wild card spot in the NFC. I think this is going to be a real tight race in the NFC. You got a lot of teams that are kind of vying for those last two wild card spots here as the season progresses, and I don't see an early front runner, but I definitely think that this suspension, by the Falcons, giving the Cardinals a big win is going to definitely help them out and help them progress as the season goes on. They're not too far back in the division. They're only a couple games back, and they're definitely showing that they can compete with some of the better teams. This is definitely a really troubling suspension when it comes to looking at the other wild card hopefuls, such as the Packers, the Vikings, the Redskins, the Bucks. They're all right there within 1 game of each other, so it's going to be interesting to see if this suspension really has an impact on that. The Panthers suspension, most importantly, I think that allows the Falcons to get back into the race for the division. This was a monumental mistake. You can't let a team that just came off of a Super Bowl, they've won 2 Super Bowls in this Madden, and they've won the division just about every single year. You can't let a team like that, when you can potentially get a 3-game lead over them, get right back in it. And I think that that's what they did. They're going to be it's going to be a fight to the finish in this division again. It's going to be interesting to see who makes the run. The Panthers suspension definitely allows the Redskins and the Bucks to pick up huge wins. So the Redskins and the Buccaneers, two more wildcard teams right now, along with the Cardinals, who picked up wins, because of these suspensions. And this is really going to hurt a couple of the teams in the NFC, especially the Vikings and the Vikings and the Packers. These are 2 teams that are right there in the wildcard race, and the Cardinals, Bucks, Redskins all get free wins. Where does that leave the Packers and the Vikings? They're in a really tough division. This is a division that's run by the Lions. Bombers run this division year after year. So, basically starting a game back, essentially in the wild card, is definitely a tough mountain and a tough hill to climb. It's going to be interesting to see how this affects the NFC playoff race. I think the team that's going to benefit most from these suspensions is definitely the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're not just in the race for a playoff spot now, but they're only 2 games back of the division lead. if this team can come on strong and win a couple in-division games at the end of the season, this could be a team that we're talking about who could have just knocked off and taken the division away from two of the best competitors in Madden 16. It's a real tough situation, and I think that the Packers and the Vikings are essentially going to get screwed. But I think that the Redskins are going to come along, the Bucks are going to come along, the Cardinals are going to come along, and they're going to take advantage of these wins, and they're going to take advantage of the suspension. And it's really interesting to see where the pieces to the puzzle are going to fit in, and how these suspensions are going to affect the NFC wildcard race. Over in the AFC, it doesn't really affect it too much. The only bit of word I will say on it is the Texans picked up a huge win against the Falcons, and the Titans got shut out actually by the Falcons when they actually came back from their suspension. So that's a huge win and a huge loss for the two teams that I think are going to compete for the AFC South. But other than that, it doesn't really affect the AFC race too much. But for those NFC teams vying for a wild card spot, you guys are going to have to get to work because there are a few teams that are already ahead. That's going to do it for this week's episode of the 2 Point Conversion Podcast. Tune in again next episode to see what segments I have in store. I'm your host, TFA Warner, signing off. Have a good week, MBL.